Elaine, what did you learn out of all those years, like all those people? And the two words that came to me was, I just think we all need to get quiet.
I have the most beautiful woman with me, beautiful soul. Her name is Elaine Glass, and she has so much wisdom that she's going to share with us. And I think one of the most fascinating things is how a career of 25, 30 years, I think we're going to find out, gave her everything that she needed to go into the career she's in now that fulfills her. So welcome, Elaine. It's so great to have you here.
It's my honor. Thank you so much for having me, Susan.
Tell us a little bit about the work that you did in the world for that. Was it 25, 30, how many years? 30 years?
When I was 22 years old, I went into the dental field. I was a dental hygienist. And for 25 years, I sat with close to 40,000 patients. It was the greatest honor of my life. I mean, it was really my life class to be able to be that close to people. You're one-on-one, you're hearing about their lives and they're sharing with you about their struggles and their joys. And when we're ages 20 to 40, we're just trying to figure out how to be adults. And that was really like where I learned how to be an adult. So
Yes.
but I learned so much from my patients, and it was very rewarding.
Yeah, I think about my dental hygienist, Jamie. I've been going to her over 15 years now, ever since I moved to the Pacific Northwest. And I've watched her evolution of growth from being in her 20s, getting married, dating the man that would become her husband, getting married. She's just had her first child, and she feels like family to me.
That's
so
right.
I completely understand that relationship that happens. And I care about her and she cares about me.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And that's what I was finding, was this connection to people and the human condition, and a privilege to be a part of that with people. And I love dentistry. And don't get me wrong, I loved the healing of the mouth. But what I really loved and what I always craved, even as a little girl, was to know people. And when I knew people, I knew myself better. So that's what was going on in that room for me. And I remember when I was 8 years old on the playground, in second grade or third grade, I'd be, my nature is to sit with people one-on-one, just like we are now, and have meaningful conversations, and, for someone to help me and maybe me to help somebody too. So I've always been this person. And so it was a wonderful profession until I was ready to go on to something different.
Tell me a little bit about that. How did that happen? And where are you arriving today?
Yes. Well, after about 27 years of being a dental hygienist, what I really realized that I was eventually doing, and particularly in the last decade of those 27 years, I was really helping people with their lives. I had really learned so much in terms of patterning and health, and what it meant to feel joy. And I'd put so many and connected so many dots together by that point, that I was really, really just sitting with people and helping people, because we had such a great rapport, as you do your hygienist, that people really would tell me a lot of things, a lot of private things. So I thought, wow, well, back then, this was about, 12, 13 years ago, life coaching was just sort of people were life coaches, but it wasn't like it is today.
Yes.
So it wasn't something that I, knew and could be directed to immediately. Really had to search it out and figure out, well, what would that look like? And, at that time I was a single mom, and how could I leave this career that was very certain for something that was very uncertain? Although I knew and believed in myself and my capabilities, but how could I really make that real?
Yes.
So I did. I took the leap. And while I was still working in my profession, I was going in the evenings to life coaching school. And I'm telling you, the minute I sat down in the first class, in the first minute, I wrote on my paper, I'll never forget this, I am home. I just knew it. And I was like, thank God, I said yes to that. So
Yeah. Well, you are a person of service. You were in service as a dental hygienist. You were in service as a life coach, and you were in service intuitively and naturally and born to be when you were a child and you were having those one-on-one conversations. I so identify with that because I was coaching before I ever called myself a coach.
right.
And I had a very dear friend who we would walk and talk, and I would advise her and I'd say, as your friend, however, I think you should see a professional counselor and somebody that can help you through this. And so she started seeing a psychologist. And then we would walk and she said, Susan, I get more help from you and more insight from you than I do. So it's like the education versus the intuitiveness. And you got the life coach skills from the credential standpoint, but you've always had that.
That's right. And like you, and I'll ask you, you probably are, and I can sort of tell, not sort of, I could really tell, it's the listening. It's the ability to listen. Chris Voss, who we both know, who's in Genius Network with us, says that listening is the most active thing we can do in his book. And I really believe that. And I was born a listener. And so you begin to hear things that others just can't. It's just a superpower. Everyone has their superpower. This is our superpower.
Yeah. And people want to be heard.
That's right.
So they seek us out.
That's right.
And when they know that they've been heard, they don't want to leave. I have clients that I've had for 8, 9, 10 years. I have staff that's been with me for 15 years, ever since I moved up here and started to do the work that I do now. So people want to be in the space of somebody who is willing to listen.
That's right. I had a patient once who was a very, very high up in Toyota. And he went to Japan and he actually met with the CEO. He said, the only reason why I got that deal done, Elaine, was because I sat there and listened to him. I flew across the world thinking I had something to say and I had something important to say to him. But all he wanted me to do is really listen. And I did. And he said he called him that evening on his flight back to Arizona. He said, you've got the deal.
Which kind of brings me, we have so much more to talk about, but it seems like the perfect opening to talk about the book that you're working on right now that's titled Get Quiet.
Yes.
Because as listeners, we need to be quiet, don't we?
And that actually, those two words came out of my mouth after one of my mentors and coaches, Christina Rasmussen, who's an expert in grief and loss, had sort of been debriefing me after that long career. And we were on a call together. She was helping me get started in my coaching business. And she said, Elaine, what did you learn out of all those years? Like all those people, almost 40, 50,000 patients. What did you learn? And the two words that came to me was, I just think we all need to get quiet. And I really didn't know fully what that meant at the time, to be honest. I didn't know at its fullest expression until now. I knew that I needed to get quiet. My life had gotten very loud, very chaotic. The overthinking mind took over. I was on a journey personally to heal my very tired heart through loss and stress and all the things that happen. Yeah, I said to her, we just all need to get quiet. And that's when I really went internally on my own personal journey to really figuring out what that meant and how not only how I could help people, but first you have to help yourself.
Yes.
So that's really what my journey was how do I help myself through and get out of pain, out of suffering, out of loss, out of grief, out of the pain of divorce, the pain of losing my dad, the pain of just any disappointment in life that we carry. We have to process that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it is through those life lessons. My life lesson came out of grief and loss, losing my husband and my mother, both
Oh,
when I
sorry
was
to hear that.
25.
Oh, I'm so
And my
sorry to hear
husband was 28 and my mother was 51. And they were both diagnosed and passed in the span of less than 1 year. So it doesn't matter what age you are, losing a parent as you losing your father and losing a spouse. Like, we don't expect to lose a spouse when we're 25 years old. We'd only been married for a few years. And yet that's where my book, The Land of I Can, came from, because it's the lessons that I learned. The land of apathy, the land of fear, the land of sorrow, the land of ashes, where everything is destroyed, and you come back in the land of I Can, where all things are possible and things begin to bloom. And we go through those stages of life. But for you, writing the book Get Quiet comes out of those personal experiences. And as you said, the words came right out when your coach asked you. And I think when you're writing a book, at least I found it for myself and for the clients that I work with, is that's the beautiful transformation if someone's willing to go deep and not just surface stuff, not just like, well, I worked as a dental hygienist and I have 2 children and that's surface. But when you go deep, that's where the transformation is. And that's where the real gold is.
Statistics would say a divorced woman with 2 young children would be and continue to be financially unstable, depressed, stuck, not able to move out and into anything that would be considered their fullest potential. I mean, it just what it is. It's just what it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. My main motivators were my 2 young sons. They were the ones that I wanted to be my best version because they deserved for me to be my best version. Yeah. And so that's why I transitioned from a hygienist to a coach, because I knew I was going to be my best version. But like you said, when you go inward, it's not easy. It's painful. But the problem that I have found myself and a lot of my clients in is this addiction to looking away at our lives, in the life that we're currently living. Another person that I really enjoy a lot is Tommy Rosen. If you've ever heard of him, he's an expert.
I haven't.
He's an expert in addiction recovery. Okay. And he came to speak once at a meeting, and lovely guy. And he said to the group, these are all the addictions you can have. And no one raised their hand, everyone was like, well, I don't really have those addictions. And he said, well, I know you all have an addiction. It's a personality addiction. And it's the addiction of looking away at our lives. And it was like, the minute he said that, it was like, yes.
We all have it. It's become an explosive addiction that we have these devices. And it's hard to learn to just put it away, turn it off. It's just become like an integral part of our lives. And that's just one minimal thing. My addiction is pushing paper. When I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, I start just busy work.
Yes.
And I have found the best thing I can do is just walk away. Take my dog and go for a walk. Just walk away. Get quiet. Just be with myself. Be with nature. Be with my perfect companion. But it's not going to happen when I'm pushing paper around.
That's actually adorable. Well, look, this is a thing, and it's probably back to caveman years. We speed up our lives when we're afraid. And, I was doing that. Like, how much more can I speed up? Because I just don't even want to look at all the things that I'm afraid of.
Yes.
And, but
It's
that was,
that blinders,
yeah,
I'm just going to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going,
right.
Energizer bunny, instead of like taking them off and saying, whoa, there's a world out here that I'm completely missing because of this busyness. It's like we're human beings, not human doings,
Yeah,
but we've lost the place of just being able to be.
100%. And I think that when I learned of what my method is now of Get Quiet, it's not that I've accomplished that I'm writing a book or accomplished the things I have in my life up until now that I'm very proud of, don't get me wrong. But it's who I've become while doing all of that. So it is in the being. It's entirely in the being. But for a lot of people, including myself, if I had stopped running, if I had stopped, the speed of that I was, at, everything would have unraveled, Susan. When I was married, I had a mask on. I think a lot of people can relate to this. I mean, I really could have won like an Oscar because I wore a mask that everything was just perfect. I lived in the big house, was married to the doctor, had two beautiful children, like everything just from the outside looked perfect. But it wasn't. And so you have to look finally at the life that you're living and really come face to face with it. And when I did, it was very, very difficult. But I had to, because to me, I mean, I had already been diagnosed with thyroid issues. So in my 30s. So this way of thinking, this way of worrying, this way of uncertainty, this way of being dishonored, everything that was happening in that environment that I was allowing, take full responsibility for that, was making me sick. And I remember years ago, I mean, this is, dating me, but years ago, watching Oprah. And there was a doctor that came on and said, when women go through menopause, if your life isn't, exactly, healthy, and, you have healthy people around you, and you're going to have such a hard time. And I just, it's those moments where you go, oh my gosh, like, and I had already been diagnosed with thyroid disease. And I thought, you know what? This is a message to me that if I don't change something, I'm going to get very sick.
I think most people, I'm not a doctor, there's my disclaimer, but I think a lot of physical illnesses are because of the dis-ease that we have emotionally and the anxiety that we have, and it manifests. Do you still have thyroid problems today?
Yes, they're not problems. They are managed, but with like a fraction of the dose of a medication that I used to be on.
There you
Because
go.
I learned how, and I'm on the road to actually wanting to heal that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to be at the effect of that. I take the measures and the actions to learn how to heal that, Now, something interesting that you just said that this is like a lot of what's in a certain chapter in my book, which is the first chapter, and that is the health of our bodies. With all those patients I saw all those years, I had a book in my room, in my operatory. It was by Louise Hay, who's the founder of Hay House, as you know, the publishing company. And it was, the title is You Can Heal Your Life. And it's actually,
I forgot that.
you've got the book.
Yes, I have the book. But keep
So
on
you
going.
can look up the body part. Okay, what's the lower back represent emotionally? What do the eyes represent emotionally? If you have hearing problems, what does that represent emotionally? And so I was connecting the dots of my patients throughout all those years with that book. And it is the most fascinating research any human can do in terms of understanding the root of disease and the solutions health. It's just unbelievable. And so, so my thyroid, was like that. She says in the book, the thyroid issues are being humiliated. Now, I can understand that for me because I always thought, oh, I'm not very smart when I was a kid. I wasn't a very good student, but I was more a dreamer. I'm a visionary. So I wasn't really a book smart person. I'm more of a creative and more of a visionary. And so with me not feeling smart, sometimes I would feel humiliated because I wasn't up to par with some of the other kids throughout school. So and that just kind of went throughout my life until I realized, wow, my smarts is because of my heart. That's where my smarts is.
Yeah.
Um,
You and I are on the same page. I
so
was
I'm
told once that I walk
fascinated.
around with little feelers, on my head. But it's like I can feel, which is another reason why I have to be cautious of my environment.
Yes.
Because I can, I can't take it. Like if I'm around negative energy, I gotta go because it just doesn't work for me. But yeah, I mean, you're a very heart-centered, service-based person, and there's a lot of wisdom there, isn't there?
There is. So, yes, I love that. In fact, I actually call it, they say the mind body connection. I actually think they're so connected that the word that I use is mighty. I've combined mind and body to mighty, MIDY,
I love that.
because I'm so passionate about that. Yeah. And so
I
it was
love
funny because
that.
when my kids were growing up, they'd have like a knee problem or they'd, have a finger problem. And I'd look in the book and go, it's because you're doing this. And they're like, Mom, I just hurt my finger. It's nothing more than that. But, as they've gotten older now, they're in their early 20s. They're onto it now. They see, they really do. And so anyway, start them young to think that
Yeah.
way.
Well, I think for me, it was always, with my husband and my mother and their youth and the illnesses that happened for each of them, which were different. And I think that started me way back then to try to understand, why does somebody recover from a life-threatening illness and other people pass as a result? And I knew there was something else. There was another ingredient there, these miracle recoveries. Well, I think that person then was operating heart, mind, body in a complete place for healing, rather than just the pills or the injection or the treatment, and giving the power away to those things
Yes.
rather than participating in the healing process.
And I'm so sorry for your loss at such a young age for you to um, experience that. But it sounds like there's so much that you've learned from that. And so grateful for that for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things, Elaine, and we all have that. I'm thinking about you having the courage. That's why my lion back here is my avatar. You had the courage when you felt the calling. You got the calling, and you knew that there was something more for you to do in the world. And you had to evaluate taking care of your children, the responsibilities that come with that, as well as for yourself. But you had the courage to hear the calling and take action on it. And I had a choice back then. I could have fallen into a pit of despair. And like, I had no education, didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know how I was going to support myself. But somehow, and I really believe this was a guiding force for me. I've always been very connected to my faith, but I believe that somewhere I got the message to just trust. I had to be active. I had to take one step, which is the message of the land if I can. But I had to both trust and believe that I was going to be okay. And then that energy that you create going into that belief gives you the power, and things come to you. Like the universe just keeps giving when you're in that space, but you're not going to be in that space when you're in a negative place of despair.
Yeah, you're speaking my language and the same exact experience, and the presence that I had to learn.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video filled with great conversation and stories. Often when I'm working with clients, they have these great stories, but they're not sure how to put them in the book and connect it to how it's relevant. But problem solved. I've created a story mapper book for you, and it's completely free. Just follow the link below to get your free copy, or go to getsusansfreebook.com.
The thing that changed my life, I mean, there are a lot of things, but one of the major things that changed my life was I was present one day at a sandwich shop. This was over a decade ago. To a gentleman who we were commenting on a shirt that was in the sandwich shop that was for sale. Anyway, we got to talking, and I was present to take the time and not be in this speeded up, vibe that I was always in. I mean, I had slowed down. I was present with him, and we ended up sitting down, enjoying our sandwiches together before I went to pick my kids up from school. And we got to talking, and he said, it sounds to me like you would really enjoy this place. It was a retreat center. I had lived by this retreat center up until then for like 20 years, would drive by it every day to work, but never went in because it was a church, and I just wasn't drawn to go into this particular church. He said, no, I really, really think that you're going to really, really benefit from what you're telling me. So I said, well, it's right by my house. So the next day I went to this retreat center beyond the church to the back. And I live in the desert in Scottsdale, beyond the church, beyond this beautiful, it was like a 25-acre property, was this beautiful labyrinth. Have you ever walked a labyrinth?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's magical.
Well, it is magical. So I'm glad that you agree. And that was the first step for my personal transformation and this is really what my book is, the metaphor for my book is a labyrinth. And it's the path to the center. Yeah. And the center meaning our center. And it changed my life forever. And the reason why it did was when you talk about trusting, when you talk about getting quiet, I had meditated for years. I had done all the things that I thought were going to help me. But the day I stepped into the mouth of the labyrinth, the birds were chirping. I heard the crunch of my feet on the gravel, like every sense of my being that I had like just exploded. And I was like, I can hear things like I've never been able to hear them before. And the very first day I got to the center of the labyrinth, now it's not, as you know, listeners may not know, but it's not a maze. So it's not to confuse you. It's a certain path that winds you around that always gets you to the center. So the first day I got to the center, I stood in silence. I looked out to these beautiful mountains that surround me. And I heard so clearly messages that were not my voice. They just weren't, because you can tell they're certain. They're calm when they come in. They're very efficient. I mean, they're very couple of words, right? Like that's how the messages come in. And to me, I think the highest currency in life is messages. People might think it's money, and I know we all need that. But to me, in my life, what has brought me love and joy and money and everything that has fulfilled me is this ability to listen to these messages. And I found the ability to do that in the center of Labyrinth. So for anyone listening, if you're interested in going to a labyrinth, there is a labyrinth world locator that you can look up, but I highly recommend it. And it's where I do all of my personal one-on-one coaching, because it's what made the difference in my life and makes the difference in my clients' lives.
Yeah, I've done labyrinths for so long, and they were much harder to find years ago. In fact, I went to France to walk the labyrinth in the big cathedral in Chartres.
Yes.
but anywhere I can walk. In fact, I've got this beautiful 2-acre, almost 3-acre pasture that's part of my property behind my home and barn. And I've thought about putting a labyrinth, and I haven't done it. It's on my bucket list. So I could just walk out and do a labyrinth in my own property area. But yeah, to me, it's a symbol to stay present, because you do have to stay present. As you said, it's not a maze, but you do have to stay present. It's a place where it's like a walking meditation, but you only have yourself. You're on that journey by yourself. To jump ship for just a second, we'll come back to Labyrinth, is that when I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is a 500-mile pilgrimage across.
Oh my gosh, did you do the whole thing?
I did. I did it in 5 weeks. I did it without a single blister, a single injury. I remember taking a photo of my pedicured feet that I had done before I left. And I mean, there was nothing on my toes. I mean, they were just, everything was, we could do a whole conversation just on this, but I chose to walk it alone. And a lot of people walk it with a group, or they go and they meet up with somebody and they are walking. And from time to time, because there's people in front of you, there's people behind you, I would see somebody that I'd been walking back and forth around, and they would come to join me in conversation. But what I found is when I was in conversation, I missed the connection outside. I missed hearing the birds. I missed hearing the frogs. I missed when I was just myself and in the world, in the physical world, my sensors were just happy. And certainly when I was talking with a person and having that communication, I was with them, but the focus changed from person to person to me and the outside world and in my own inner world, like we're connecting. And that's what happens on the Labyrinth.
That's right. That's such a great example. It's a perfect example. Perfect example. Look, we're desperate for one thing. I think people are missing. They think there's something really, really missing in their lives, and they don't know what it is. I didn't know what it was for me. But when I got to the center of the labyrinth, and time again, I mean, I was going every day, because it was right by my house, and I was hearing these amazing things that were totally true, and synchronizations that were happening that you can't even make up, So I was like, this is really cool, and this is working. And really what was missing in my life was me. I was missing myself. And it was just, wow, like I have really missed me and who I am, and who am I? I mean, it's the ages old, question. Who am I? And I was missing knowing that, because when you're a mom and you're raising kids and you're working full time, and you're not really focusing on that, but we lose ourselves, and it's tragic when that happens. But it happens to all of us at one point or another, and we just have to find our way back. And I found my way back in the labyrinth, and it sounds like you've enjoyed that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And while I work with both men and women, about 75% or more, could be 80% of my clients are men. And I think that men often, I mean, they're raised to go to school, to have a good profession, to get married, to have children, to provide, and they're on the same hamster wheel that you were describing that you were on as a single parent, and they can't get off the hamster wheel to ever find out that they really didn't want to become a doctor or a lawyer. They really wanted to be an actor or a painter or something that was on the more creative space, but they got pigeonholed because that's what they were raised to become. And when we take away that early programming and we just let the self unfold that was born into this world, that unique being that we each are, there's just magic that happens, and you see what's there. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. The labyrinth was my path to just completely loving myself. And I know we hear a lot about these these, love yourself, self-love. It's hard to put it into words. It's such a feeling of just total self-acceptance, total honoring this life. And when I get to the center of that labyrinth, using my own methods, because I was literally desperate to find, myself, my healing, my love, my joy. Yeah, I got to the center one day after using the methods that I use, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like when your brain just clicks and you've crossed a bridge and you are never going back. And the result of that was, I don't need to be watching the news anymore. I don't need to put in any fear, negativity in my body anymore. I don't need to be putting any junk in my body. I need to always be surrounded by beautiful humans who embrace me and support me and help me on this path. I mean, it was just my brain just clicked into a whole different mode.
And once it clicks, you can't go back.
You don't go back.
It's like once you see it, you can't not see it.
You can't not see it because you just, yeah. And, but it's interesting you said about the men, because years ago, I was at Angel Valley, which is, I think it's in Sedona here in Arizona. I think they've got one of the largest labyrinths in the country. And there was a group of men there. And normally at this retreat center, I'd only see, really a lot of women. But there were a group of about 8 men. And so I asked the owner after the men had left. I saw them walking the labyrinth. I said, who were they? And he said, oh, they're all from Silicon Valley. They're all these men who very, established, successful, but, just incredibly unhappy. A lot of their marriages are falling apart. A lot of their relationships with their kids are not well. And some of them are alcoholics. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, it's for everybody to try to hear. It's really about hearing the truth. When we really lie to ourselves a lot. I find that I do. It's like, oh, everything's okay. I don't need to look there. But it's like, wow, you really begin to hear the truth.
And a lot of the stuff, as you said earlier, comes from that early programming. As a child, you didn't think you were smart. And you didn't realize there's a difference between book smart and body smart or heart smart. And we have those things that just get layered as we get older. And the heart, I think also there's a critical time that happens when you said that when you were younger, you had to keep going. When you were first divorced and you're taking care of the children, and you couldn't have become who you are today if you hadn't been on that path. But there comes a point when you recognize that that time is done. That time is done. There's a new direction that's being called for. The new direction for you became to unfold whenever you started to walk the labyrinth. And so that's your tool now. And when you talk about the methods that you're going to tell people about in your book and that have been derived from the labyrinth, is there anything you can share with us today of those methods?
Sure. Well, as you know, and I will explain to listeners, the labyrinth, a very basic labyrinth, has 7 circuits or 7 paths that you walk. And what I did at the very beginning of my journey was all I did was just walk the labyrinth. I wasn't really thinking too much more than, if I had a problem I need solved, bringing that into the labyrinth, listening to the answer. 99% of the time, I would hear an answer. Now, it could have just been inspiration, like everything will be okay, or, just they're always very simple, but I always had an answer. So that's how it began. But I really noticed that, okay, there were 7 paths, 7 circuits. Okay. Then the next thing I was doing was looking at certain aspects of my daily life that were helping me move forward. And those were things like the health of my body, the health of my relationships and my environment, the health of my mindset. Was I resting? That was really the key. And that's actually chapter 4 that I'm really excited about in my book. It's called Get Rest. It's so important when we're doing this type of work, personal development work, to rest, to integrate. And so anyway, and then there are things like, connecting to your intuition that helped me, taking action to move my life forward, getting to the center and really feeling and hearing and listening. So anyway, then there are 7 things that I really were like, wow, this layers perfectly onto the 7 paths, with the 8 being the center of the labyrinth, which I have. So I have 8 chapters, but so I combine those 2 together because that's really the method. Now, something that came up that's really interesting, I think you'll find this fascinating, which I know I did, and I still am sort of pinching myself around this, is when you get quiet, the subtle things that you begin to notice and feel and get in tune with, right? It's this tuning fork, like you said. Mm-hmm. What happened to me next, I did not see coming with this method. And it was the 3rd layer of the book that I incorporate here. I began to connect in a way that you might want to say like you're channeling, you're really highly intuitive. And I began to recognize that there were 8 points in our body, energy points in our body that laid nicely into the 8 points of the labyrinth too.
Okay.
And so when people walk this labyrinth in my method, they're not only thinking about their bodies, the health of the body, the health of the mind, and whatever those things are, but they're actually able to say, okay, well, if path number 3, which is in my method is the abdominal region, it's the life force. It is where all life begins in a woman's womb. That's my first chapter. And that's when people can walk the path of the first path, which is the first chapter, and focus on their body, focus on that energy point of their belly and the health of their body. And so this is how the book goes, is it's layered with a lot of healing of the body as well through energy work.
Because it is, I mean, our bodies are our vessels. It's the vessels that we operate on in the world. It's kind of like a computer. It's the hardware, but the software is what we're talking about is one doesn't work without the other. And we have to take care of both. It can't be one or the other. And so I love that that's incorporated. And I have a question for you. Since it's 8 points that you've identified in the body, do they line up with the chakra? And is the 8th point at the top of the head, or can you answer that question for? I don't want to give too much away because I want people to buy your book when it comes out.
Oh no, I love to share this because I want people to not have to wait for a book. I really want to serve people now. You can liken it to the chakra system, but it's not. It's completely different.
Okay.
The chakras, I think, have colors and things like that. This is more focusing on 8 points of the body, which are bony points. I mean, of course, we have a lot of bones in our body. So, but these really are particularly bony points. Okay, so the head, the chest, the belly, the hips. Now, the hips came to me fascinating. We think that we carry the weight of life on our shoulders. And what came to me was we carry the weight of our life and our emotions, particularly with women, in the cupped shape of our hips.
Fascinating.
And so I have a visualization healing where I show people how to take that energy and move it out of that cup shape that's stuck in there. And then there's the tailbone, which I don't know how the chakras are, but the tailbone is where all intuition is. Now, this is what came to me. Okay, so I trust it because that's just what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Trust it.
Because it came from divine source. It came energetically, not from your head.
So I had a healer who helped me open my tailbone. I was like a roller skating queen back in the, my in the 80s or whatever when it was big, but I had a big fall. And I remember it hit my tailbone to the point where, like, I remember not being able to even walk for a few days. And I was a gymnast, so it was a big thing back then. And I'm telling you, I really feel like when this healer came and helped me unblock this energy around my tailbone, it was a flood, it was like the floodgates of intuition opened up around my tailbone. So it's the hips, it's the tailbone. So these are all bone, right? Then the the from the hips down to the base of the feet. And then the seventh point is the feet. And the eighth point is actually the top of the shoulders. And that is the center of the labyrinth, is the eighth point. And what I envision, what I take people through these visualizations that really are healing the energy, is it's like bright light shining, just pure love, pure light shining up into, the furthest point of the universe. And then that light shining back down and meeting us back here. And so, yeah, the book has taken on such a playful, such an amazing healing. My mentor, who's actually my Vedic astrologer, Alexander, who lives in Santa Barbara, I just love him. He says, women's greatest accomplishment is play.
Oh,
And so
and we forget about that when we go into work mode, don't we?
Yes, yes. And so it's really become I'm playing now. Like, how could this be? But I am playing, and I am just loving this so much.
Well, it's just lovely. And I really liked when you said that what you get in the labyrinth are messages, because as we're here today on Messengers on a Mission, I love the messages that people are so passionate about, that they want to go out into the world and be a force for good. And so you're getting those messages from the labyrinth. You're getting them, like, definitely the tailbone and the shoulder bone. That is not a chakra. It's very, very different. So we know it's coming from divine source. In closing today, what would you say your one message is then for the world around getting quiet? What is the message that you want people to know that they're going to get from your book?
It's such a beautiful question. You're gonna love your life so much. You are going to love who you are so much. You are going to be who you are, who God made you to be in this world so much, and you're going to be able to live that. And why else are we here?
Yeah, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than to be who we were born to be, right? Listeners, what's the best way for them to reach you? I know you have your website, elaineglass.com, but is that the best way for them to reach you?
Actually, well, two ways. If they want to be the first to get the book, they can go to getquiet.com and just put their email in, share their email. Once it's released, they'll be the first to get it. One thing I think would be actually really fun is, and I might even use their story in the book, is if they emailed me directly, which is Elaine@getquiet.com. ELAINE at getquiet.com. If they go to a labyrinth, it'd be fascinating to hear the stories. But if you go to a labyrinth and you get to the center and you walk back out and email me your story, I would love to either share it in my book possibly, or even somewhere on social media, So that's another option that I think would be really fun.
I love that. I may have to go find a labyrinth somewhere. I will put that information in the show notes below. And thank you so much. I think we need a return visit once the book comes out.
Oh, that would be fun.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.